Hey, welcome back to Invisible Machines. We have a great episode for you this week. As always, we are really excited to be having a conversation with Don Scheibenreif. Don is the co-author of When Machines Become Customers. He's also a vice president and distinguished analyst with Gartner's Customer Experience Research Group. I was actually on an airplane when this conversation happened, so we are really fortunate to have Michael Salamon filling in as the co-host on this one. Michael is kind of a 360-degree designer with more than 30 years of experience across just about every single industry you can think of. So he's really a perfect fit for a conversation this deep with a Gartner analyst. So we are really, really fortunate to have him joining us today. When you think about the idea of customers, of machines rather, becoming customers, for me, and I think for Robb and for Michael as well, we start thinking about the Internet of Things, which was kind of a popular concept. I guess it's been more than 10 years ago in the UX community. And the idea was that all of the objects in your life that were somehow collecting data or able to track certain metrics would end up communicating with each other and would create this whole new tapestry of experience. What was missing back then was an ecosystem where that data could be shared and kind of a common language for all these different pieces of technology to communicate with one another. So obviously, with conversational AI now everywhere in the world, this is becoming more feasible, right? Machines can speak to each other. As comes up in this discussion, they can speak to each other in human language now. So it really changes everything in terms of our relationship with technology. And also, as you start thinking about those things, big issues come up relating to trust and transparency. And this conversation touches on a lot of those important things. And of course, we have a Gartner analyst in the room, so we're going to talk about how enterprises are approaching these technologies, because this is a huge lift for a lot of companies, a big investment. And the good news, I think, that emerges from this conversation is that organizations are really no longer in a place where they need to scrap all of their old systems, right? The technology exists today to kind of add sort of a communication layer or membrane over top of all your existing technology that enables everything to kind of communicate and share data sets. And then you can, as a business leader, start building automated experiences right on top of that. So, this is a fascinating conversation, I think, for just about anyone who's interested in this space. So I'm going to go ahead and take you to that conversation with Robb and Michael and Don right now.
When machines become customers. I think that's fascinating. That was all I needed to see to want to read this book.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I was like, this is super interesting, intriguing idea. Take us down that road a little bit, if you don't mind. Like what?
Yeah.
I say the good. Let's say the good and the bad.
So maybe we could start with the origin of the concept, Robb. About 7-8 years ago, I was asked to make a presentation at one of our conferences about what happens when an IoT device becomes a customer, Internet of Things device. And that just kind of led us down a path of exploring the concept in much more detail. I filled up a room of about 800 people and just walked. It was kind of like a TED Talk, but just asking the question and seeing what the response was. And the response was positive, and that led to, over a period of 7-8 years, about 12.5 research notes, presentations, webinars, all types of stuff out there. And ultimately, we decided that we had enough content for a book, and we decided to go for it. So it's been a pretty amazing journey. And what's interesting is that we did not plan to publish the book right around the time that ChatGPT exploded. We literally pushed the button on Amazon Kindle on January 3rd. And then literally, I think it was a week after that or 2 weeks after that, which is when all the buzz on ChatGPT and OpenAI started hitting all of the airwaves and stuff. So while I'd like to say that we knew that was going to happen, we did not. We knew AI was going to be part of the machine customers concept, but the whole discussion around generative AI and AI in general has really shown a light on the work that we've done.
Got it. I was thinking, because I not in these words, but I'd be like, when a customer becomes a part of your IoT network,
Yeah.
or when a human becomes part of your IoT network, that's kind of like when you look at conversation as a communication channel between machines and other machines and machines and humans, we realize that humans could be on both ends. They could be the receiving end, but they could also be the sensor out in the world to collect data that can be a part of that IoT network. Like, this doesn't need to be a heterogeneous community of just robots only. Like, why can't humans can do a lot of things? They're great sensors out there, to ping a farmer and say, what does this soil condition look like? They can do a pretty good job of feeding that information back in a less than black and white way. So we've always been fascinated with like expanding the thought of IoT to include humans. And this is just another angle, I guess, which is, maybe even going a step further and saying like raising the devices to becoming customers. So it's kind of like an equalizing. Is it humans letting machines in on their communities, or is it machines letting humans in on their communities? And is this if machines start buying things, is this like a equalizing or?
Well, let's be clear about something, Rob, is that we believe, and we've written about this in the book, that the humans always have the off switch. So any type of agency that we give to machines is born from us, from people.
Right.
So when we invite them in to take work off of our plates or do research on our behalf, we are the ones that are giving them that agency. Now, in our book, we describe different levels of agency, from machines as what we call bound customers when they buy from one device. So we like to talk about our HP printer. That printer, when you connect it to the internet, can only buy ink from HP. So that's a fairly common area. But the next level is machines as adaptable customers, which is what happens when the machine has choice. Let's say I will authorize what we call a custobot that works on your behalf, that I want you to get ink from my printer, but I want you to go to these 3 sources. And if you find something else, by all means, go for it. So they can choose between multiple suppliers. And then the third level is probably more a little bit what you're describing, which is machines as autonomous customers, where the machine has much more decision discretion on what to do. It maybe even anticipates your needs. Maybe it adds, maybe not a new printer or not a new set of ink into your cart, but maybe it says you need to buy a different printer, and here's why. So that's the spectrum that we talk about. But again, humans are always in control.
Got it. So Michael and I were actually talking a bit about this, this kind of, concept of where do humans and algorithms fit into all of this? Because the algorithms are designed by humans, right? I mean, the decision criteria, as blunt as we might want to look at it, like, buying new ink, you could just say that's just a simple algorithm. It's just a blunt object algorithm, right? And we could probably say that blunt algorithms are far more dangerous than more sophisticated ones, because we look at some of the Facebook, algorithms for likes and things. They're just so simple and so blunt that at scale they can cause huge issues. Like same with ChatGPT. Like if everyone bought into the ChatGPT recommendation engine and said, what vegetables should I eat this week, we could run a shortage on carrots, because the whole world suddenly went out and bought carrots. And the problem isn't carrots, and the problem isn't the truth of the machine, right? And the accuracy of the information. The problem is that we're all now sharing a brain, and we're sharing a single decision-making algorithm. And so that kind of leads to, there seems to be a conversation, is the future, are we better off with a bunch of little independent bots or algorithms that are running, that aren't talking to each other? or does this need to be centralized in some way? Like, should there be an awareness of each other and what they're doing? Some super bot that kind of says, hey, wait, like, you don't have any money to buy ink. I don't know, Michael, you had some thoughts on this.
It's interesting. There's a couple things I want to explore for sure, but the trust spot immediately, and the printer toner ink is one of the greatest ones to do it, because you already kind of feel scammed by it. They've got bad PR anyway around how much it costs. It's DRM'd, like you were suggesting it could be. And so there's a trust problem of knowing that it's going to, on my behalf, maybe order things that I don't have money for or don't need, right? And so the human in the loop, which you were suggesting is always there, is sort of important, because I can then probably say, hey, no, you don't need to buy that. I'm not going to be doing the level of printing I was doing during this session of whatever my life had thrown at me. So I don't need that service. But that trust level is very interesting, because I think it also speaks to your levels of autonomy or agency, I think is what you said, right? So that gets really interesting. On my behalf, find a cheaper toner that is going to, fulfill my needs, and then present me the options so that I can make the ultimate choice. And that gets back to like that digital assistant, concierge bot looking out for your best interests. What the thing is, I think is really fun, and we were sort of thinking about, is when a digital agent on my part is interfacing with a digital agent on the printer toner's part. And for sure, they are going to be interfacing in a manner that we have designed, which is conversational. But at some point, do they need us? Like, can they just get to the nitty gritty and kind of cut the fat? And we were joking about like going like, okay, I'm allowed to negotiate up to $47, but I won't go over that. And the other one's like, oh, cool, because I won't gonna go about 46. So there almost becomes that again, like, are they letting us in? Is there going to be that undercurrent by itself?
Yeah, so like, wait, the manufacturer of the printer wrote the algorithm on when I should buy ink.
Well, so there's a trust problem.
It is a trust.
But they already did it, though, right? They've already have that. They already tell you when, and you just have to like say, nope, go for it, man, burn it down to the end, or whatever.
And I obviously I don't want to focus on HP, because there's a lot of other examples out there.
Sure. There's plenty of examples.
But, the whole idea, I want to go back, Mike, to your discussion about trust. I mean, we identify it as a major issue because in order for humans to delegate more work to a machine, the machines have to prove it themselves. So, I think in the short term, they're going to be more of the blunt algorithms where it's yes, no, do this, don't do that type thing. But I think as these, especially with the advent of generative AI, the ability of these machines to actually make more decisions, to consider more options is real. In fact, in writing the book, we actually interviewed the chief digital officer of a large credit card processor. And they have ambitions about wanting to be a trust broker, because let's go back. If my custobot is negotiating with your custobot, I need to know that your custobot is trustworthy. Have you been certified? Because you could imagine that, let's say I'm a company and people want to sell me printer toner, and I have no idea who these incoming bots are. I have no way to verify their identity. They could be scamming me, trying to get my business. I might pay them and not ever get my ink toner. That to me is someone's got to figure this out. So I could see the emergence of trust brokers, another way to verify identity of, is this bot that's working on my behalf legit or not? Because if you can't verify that, you're right, this won't work.
Yeah, and what about the centralization versus decentralization concept? Like, I feel like that's one of the things that's just being overlooked. The idea that if it was a big company with millions of printers out there, and they were doing live updates to these algorithms, and something happened, like the stock market crashes when as a result of too many people using a similar algorithmic pattern, and then all of a sudden the issue, comes down to the shared and scope of the algorithm. Had it been, a minority and there'd been more variety and diversity in the algorithms, this wouldn't have happened. But because there's such a similarity, so companies with all the right intentions and customers, feeling good about it, but then some bug comes out and everyone's printer just orders ink cartridges on the same day and causes, havoc. Of course, that's probably there's worse problems like causing the market to crash. There are other examples that would be worse than that, but we seem to be holding on the ink cartridge. How isn't that like this emergent complexity that humans have a hard time seeing, and we kind of look at like large companies not quite being able to play these emergent complexity consequences out, like Facebook and the consequences of their simple algorithms of likes and dislikes, and going, we didn't mean for this to happen.
Well, I think what that goes back to is, what are your ethical principles and how do they inform your algorithm development? What data are you collecting? How are you going to use it? How does the model work? I think if you're able to be much more thoughtful and even know what your principles are before you even develop the algorithms, that's half the battle. So I think the examples you're describing are maybe those unintended consequences were not foreseen because it was very new, but we've seen enough of them today that if we're going to do something about it, we actually do have to spend time thinking about the unintended consequences of our actions. So I'd like to be an optimist, Rob, and say that organizations are going to be having more AI ethics, if you want to call it that, built into their development processes.
What do you think about enterprises? Do you think they're going to look beyond the bottom line? Like, do you think they're wired to see this coming, or do you think they're just going to go for the next quarterly earnings bump?
Well, I'd see that enterprises that are focused on growth, which happen to be a lot of our clients, and even the publisher of the magazine that you're associated with is also looking for growth. I think what we've tried to do is present machine customers as a viable path to growth, in addition to human customers. And our research tells us, when we talk to CEOs, they tell us by the year 2030, they expect anywhere from 15 to 20% of their revenue to come from machines, not just from human interaction. So those types of things, Rob, tell us that this is a viable concept. And so far, when we've shared this with our large clients and even others, they say, yeah, I think it's possible and we need to be thinking about it.
Got it. Yeah, I think I'm in your camp, which is, I think what you're saying is, yeah, there'll be bumps along the way and we'll learn. But generally speaking, this is this ends up in a place of convenience for the customer.
Oh yeah.
And maybe there will be an agent on the other side someday that negotiates with the printer to say, no, not yet, let's wait a day. That's talking to the bank account so that the printer doesn't have to talk to the bank account.
Yeah, I think those are all, these are the types of scenarios that we ask our clients to think about as they think about levels of automation and the use of bots and machine customers in their business. It's simply a matter of taking a look at a customer process and take the human out and put the machine in and say, okay, what do we have to be thinking about? And even that exercise has proven to be very powerful for some of our clients. People are still learning, Rob. Those of us that are really close to this work saying, well, why doesn't everybody know about it? But you'd be surprised when I just bring up the simple example of the HP Instant Ink service, and I say, look, this is an example of HP manufacturing their own customers. They go, oh, okay, now I see what you're talking about. So part of it is, this stuff has been around us for a long time. We've just tried to reframe it and repackage it into something that can be pursued.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. The idea makes sense, and we do consider many of our purchases chores. I know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't feel like I'm giving up anything.
No, like car insurance, toilet paper, other types of commodity items, tires for your car. That's what we talk about. That's the fun part, which is, can I offload some of this stuff to a machine? Maybe Alexa, or you have your own bot. We are publishing research at Gartner. Most people don't realize that Siri, Alexa, they work for Apple and Amazon. They don't work for you.
Right.
They serve you. But do we need our own bots that work for us?
Yes.
To be our true agents? That does not exist right now.
No,
it doesn't.
In my world, the answer is clearly yes.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to be putty in their hands if,
yeah,
at least the way the current companies sort of structure themselves and how they do business, it's very antagonistic, right? It's not necessarily customer service first. It's high quality customer service as a lip service, and then cost and revenue.
Sure. I mean, it's certainly capitalism has helped create the constructs of Alexa and Siri. I mean, the profit motive has created this technology innovation. I think what the question is what is our relationship with this technology? How will we shape the technology versus letting it shape us? That to me is one of the big questions that we talk about at Gartner, is that we cannot just be victims of technology. We have to play an active role in their use and development. So it's a very interesting dynamic. What is Alexa and Siri taught us? That it's now okay to talk to computers and they'll talk back to you. Before that, it was very hit or miss. It was very mechanical.
So I spend a lot of time actually on this, the McLuhan, we make our tools and then our tools shape us, we shape our, and I've been trying to because we're at the beginning, right? We're at the we make our tools part. Have you spent any time thinking forward, how are these tools, do you think, going to shape us differently in the future and our behaviors? I think we tend to look into the future and think of ourselves and our behaviors as static, right? And everything else as static, and then we just look at that one piece. We look at self-driving cars, and then we imagine ourselves and everybody else and everything else and every other technology static, and then we kind of draw a future with that's not real because those other things change and evolve just as fast. Have you spent any time thinking about how will these tools shape us? How will we become the GPS story where you're halfway on a trip and the battery dies and you no idea where you are because you just absolutely haven't been paying attention at all to the road?
Well, I think that's a risk with any technology development, Rob. I'd like to take a more positive approach that these machines are helping us. They're augmenting our abilities. They're making us more effective. But you know what? I live in California now, but I lived here almost 30 years ago where we had the Thomas Guide, which was literally an inch thick binder of maps, spiral bound, because California.
Yeah, I loved that actually.
I thought it was pretty cool, right? So you think about how you're going to plot your adventure using flipping through the maps and writing down the directions, right? That was a very real skill, and you had to stay very focused on the road in order to get to your destination. Yes, has GPS taken that away from us? Of course it has. I mean, we are just now, it's created more ease for us. Maybe we can focus on other things. So I think the point here is that we cannot let technology reduce us to a point where we're just following orders. We're just doing what they tell us to do. That's not the point. The point is, how will this technology help us be more productive, that we can spend time on other? It's a classic argument. I don't really have any other response for that. But I can just tell you, my wife and I, for example, about 5 years ago, we closed on our house here in California. I was in Cape Town, South Africa, and she was in India. We literally closed on the house with our phones. We didn't have to be.
Isn't that awesome when that happens?
Yeah. It's when stuff like that happens, holy crap. I mean, that is so cool. And then we all have examples in our home lives about how this technology has helped us in unexpected ways. So I think that part of it is the positive side. But I hear what you're saying, Rob, is we cannot let pieces of critical thinking that are endemic to humans atrophy if machines do too much for us.
So we were having a conversation about wellness, healthcare, future of healthcare with Lee Hood, and it was in prior episode. And one thing we positioned as like, well, what if the GPS is, I don't know I'm sure you've had this experience where like you're in the car and your car GPS is going and your Google phone GPS, and they're like, they almost argue with each other.
Yeah.
And you're like, which one? Shut up, one of you.
Yeah.
But we were talking about like, let's say that it's healthcare and it is a critical thing. So you have two of them arguing, like, should you, shouldn't you, pros and cons. And so instead of one being like nanny AI, where it's like guiding you, you get to listen to a healthy debate between two, and then you decide. And what Lee brought up, which I have held on to since then, because I thought it was absolutely the number one outcome possible out of this, is the amount of education you end up getting now listening to this argument. That what a great way to actually provide agency. Like, it's kind of the opposite, right? You're actually creating agency through it versus taking it away. And so are these patterns just, is that the fear just a lack of imagination on some of these patterns that we can create to just how we use it, right? It's not that they exist, that we're doomed to some sort of nanny AI that's going to make all the decisions for us, so we no longer know how to make decisions, but maybe it enables us to make better decisions, and that's it. And that's how the tools will shape us.
I totally agree, Rob. And that's actually a central tenet of the book, is that these machine customers help us make better decisions. Yes, they take some of the drudgery out of our lives, but on the whole, for example, if I'm a manufacturing company and I need to buy a new technology system, can a bot working on my behalf do the research far better than I can, present me the options, but I still make the decision? Maybe they surface variables I hadn't even considered that say, that maybe the vendor's DE&I record is really important to me. And they found some information that says, hey, this vendor is really a leader in this space, and by giving them your business, you're supporting them. So I believe that, as you said, that these machines can actually make us smarter because they are presenting us with more information by which we can make a decision. And again, that to me is part of the positive side of this.
Yeah, it's in fact, that's what they're making easier, the research, not the decision.
Yeah.
The research. And we love that. Who cares? Who wants to work hard at gathering data? Like,
totally
let's make
agree.
that easy.
Totally
That
agree.
way we have more data to work with, more decisions that are data-based.
Yeah.
And so if that's like a trajectory, then maybe trust, and I don't know, Michael, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but trust isn't as important, because which one am I trusting? I'm listening to two arguments, and now I'm just trusting myself.
The transparency provided really gives you like not only that educational insight, but then provides you like a little bit of more of a logical kind of construct to then weigh which you would probably, hopefully in a healthcare situation especially, right, where you may not be as knowledgeable about the breadth and depth of that specific thing. So I think you design the pattern that allows for that to exist, and probably some really great stuff comes out of it. And that might continue with the trust thing. I think the trust thing is going to come with convergence of more information about me. So that touches on something y'all said, which is, do you get your own private like LLM, right? Like, am I paying with my service to provide Facebook their data on me to use that? And so I think that becomes interesting again in the trust space of like, who's on you're operating on my behalf, prove it. And until you can prove it, then I'm gonna kind of suspend that space. But anywhere where I'm out of my league intellectually, which is a lot of places, is probably, I would probably look for those things there, because that's the sort of advice that you want a second opinion, right? Would it be great to get a second opinion on the thing you wrote yourself.
Yes, sir.
So it would be very, very cool to see that. At some point, diminishing returns will probably show up, so you don't need 40 of them doing it, right? It only needs to be a couple. So I think that's really an interesting play.
Yeah.
And then that gets to that again, of that shorthand of, are we going to get to a place where I'm sort of the overseer of said sort of decisions, and an executive decision menu is given to me at the end of the day, and I say, oh, yes, but no, I don't want that one to happen.
Yeah.
Do this instead. And then things kind of continue. So yeah, the convergence of it, I think it will help, knowing that it knows other things about my desires, needs, and maybe can even then forecast things that I might be paying attention to.
Yeah, or even compare it to people like you. So today's recommendation engines.
Oh, yeah.
They said people like you bought this, but what you're describing is a whole nother level of context, which doesn't exist today. And I think your trust points are very, very valid, because how much information am I going to give? What am I going to get for it? The classic equation today. And, I hate to say it, but you know what? I will probably trust Amazon and HP and Apple versus some brand new startup that I'm not familiar with, until they've earned it. And I think everyone's got their trust formula, if you want to call it that. Everybody's got their lines. And it's going to be a matter of experimentation. Some things are going to work and some things are not. I mean, think about Alexa, 8 years ago when it first came out. It was clunky. It was hard. Sometimes it did not understand you, but think about it 8 years later, how much it is. And I think it just got a GPT thing added to it. Same thing with Siri. So I think part of this is patience. Part of it is experimentation. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to break. And that's part of the process. None of this technology is perfect by any stretch.
I can't help but nerd out on the machines buying stuff. Because I got to go to implications, right? I got to go to okay, machines are buying stuff. They can make decisions in split seconds. They can make good decisions quickly. They don't get stuck on, some of the typical biases that we have. Convenience doesn't matter to them. So my machine's going to pick the best, cheapest option. If it's working on my behalf, right? If it's not installed by the manufacturer, if it's working on my behalf, it's going to pick the best, cheapest option for me, and then another one's going to come out, and overnight, instantly, it's going to know it. It's going to know it faster than I know it, and it's going to switch faster than I would ever switch, and that's going to happen for everyone just instantaneously, or some large number of people instantaneously will also know this. So we have this this from a mechanic standpoint, from a customer standpoint, you're successful until the next day and you're not. This whoa, I was number one and I was getting, 1 million orders a day, and today I got 100.
Yeah.
How do you know what to buy? How do you know what to supply?
Yeah.
I mean, that whole just-in-time thing becomes kind of a nightmare.
Well, I think we actually touch on that a little bit in the book, which is how do you track the buying behaviors and the purchasing patterns using machine customers? My hope would be is that the intelligence would come sooner rather than later, instead of waiting for somebody to wake up in the morning and say, "Oh my God, we're off." The machine's already done the analysis and alerting you for it. And I think that this gets back to who the bot is working for. One of the things that we actually talk about is how do you influence the algorithms? I think, Rob, you're getting at that a little bit, is that if I went from 1 million units a day down to 100, it means somebody influenced the algorithms of the people that were buying from me but are no longer buying from me. How do you do that? Yeah. And one of the things we talk about in the sales practice is that the role of the human salesperson may be more like a data scientist than a relationship-based seller if they're selling to machines, because their relationship feature-based, emotion-based selling is irrelevant selling to machines. So instead, what I have to do is I may have to get to the human who's writing the algorithm that governs the machine that's buying from me. And if I can influence that algorithm, then I have a shot that my product will get into your cart faster or better than my competitors.
Right.
So this is where the humans still play a role in this, because until machines start writing each other's algorithms, there's a human that's writing it for them.
Right. Yeah, I wonder. I guess your point is valid, and I think like the logical conversation before the one where machines just en masse swap products is reputation and some centralized version of reputation that they share and use, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot less conversation about that than it deserves. I think there's still a lot of conversation, but a lot's happened in 20 years when it comes to reputation, where mom and pop restaurants are accountable, and we can go look at their score, their rating, whereas before it was just a crapshoot. Whether like the trust, there's some level of leveling of the playing field that's happened with technology in terms of trusted reputation, and saying, hey, I can trust to go to this mom and pop place now because they got amazing Yelp ratings or whatever. And so, I guess if machines start buying, there's bound to be some sort of, centralized or quasi-centralized or decentralized reputation component that eventually emerged that these things would use to make decisions onto where should I buy this ink?
Yeah.
Where is it going to be cheaper? Where do you think that reputation, and I'm, this is just pie in the sky here. Where do you think that'll come from? Will that be like some sort of blockchain, decentralized thing, or do you think it's like the Google search?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think I can actually see machine customers looking at the ratings. Maybe me as a human owner, I would say, okay, I don't want to talk to anybody that has less than a 4-star rating. You could program that into it. Or else we did a scenario where we had a smart vending machine that was tasked with finding its own repair service, right, to repair it. So it went and reviewed the ratings, but it also looked at the verbatims as well, because you can't just look at the ratings. You got to do some analysis of the language in the rating itself. So I could see that happening. And there may be other sources of data out there. Maybe the Better Business Bureau has a system where people report bad businesses. Maybe it consults that. So I think the reputation, and I think this gets back to Mike's thing about trust. How do I trust this business? There's going to be multiple data points that could kind of result in a trust score.
Yeah. And
the good news is about these machines is that they could query likely all those different data sources as part of the decision process.
So some sort of amalgamation and aggregation of it. Yeah, that does make sense, and that's probably safer because we're not trusting one source that has an issue, and suddenly a company goes out of business, and you're like, oops, sorry, right. we got your company name mixed up with somebody else's. I think that happened on the stock market, right? Like a number of times where stocks were bought because the ticker got mixed up.
But just look at if you're a homeowner, right? So you can. I used Angie's List. I think it's called Angie now for many years, because I knew they had a very rigorous process by which they interviewed and certified their repair people, and then the customers also rated them. So that was like a double layer of trust. I knew that the company was standing behind this contractor as well as other people that use them. Same thing with companies like American Home Shield, the home warranty companies. They have a pre-certified list of people that they go to when something goes wrong. So I could see some service popping up that's able to do this and say, look, and it could be the credit card company, could be somebody else, it could be Google, who knows? But I do think that we're going to have, at least in the initial phases of the development of machine customers, some level of trust verification.
Yeah, and then we get into that blunt algorithm thing where, where like, how does anyone break through if, like, an algorithm's simple, give me 4 stars and above. Okay, well, this product has no ratings. Who's going to try it?
Right.
Like, which algorithm's like the one that says, oh, I like to try the new thing on the block?
Yeah.
like we kind of get into like the guys at the top stay at the top, and there's no way to break through the bottom. And of course we'll solve it. Like it's just more complex algorithms that, you know, that we'll have to, you know, kind of experiment a little bit. And I think, like you said, the human factor will always still be there. So there'll always be some people that will buy manually. And
yeah, I mean, we're doing some work right now about the choices that companies have. Either you make something that could be a machine customer or you don't. And if you don't make something, but you know that machines might buy from you, then to your example, you have to have ratings. You have to have data available to a machine who's going to make decisions. And you may not know what data they want, so you have to put everything there. That's the type of preparation that we're talking to our clients about, which is if a machine customer is going to come knocking on your door, they're going to go to your digital commerce portal first. So you have to make sure that that portal can accommodate their needs. And that's what kind of makes people's brains explode, because they're already their data, product data may not be up to date, may not be complete. The information might not be there. So there's definitely going to have to be some cleanup for companies if they don't make machine customers.
yeah, I don't know why, but when I think about this idea, I just keep mapping to how people buy and then go across to, okay, how's that going to look like in machines? You know, I just keep pattern after pattern. And one of the ones I think about is I have this friend who's, I mean, he's just a research machine. Like if he buys it, I know it's like, I don't even need to do my own research. Like I just like, what did you get? Okay, I'm just going to get that.
I have friends like that too. Yeah.
And I'm like, I won't bother. And I think like, what if that's an algorithm? Like, I think that's where we're headed, right? Where I'm going to be like, if that algorithm said to do it, I'm not even going to bother doing my own research. Like I know I can trust, I can trust that thing. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I'm glad he did it. Like he saved me a ton of time. But what I like about this idea is now he's not going to spend as much time like walking me through the research and decision-making criteria he used, because he's doing me a favor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that machine would. It could be transparent, to your point earlier. It could easily like just here's how I came to that decision. Here's the criteria I used, and kind of to our earlier discussion, maybe there's another one that gives me the cons.
And we tell our clients, you know, while ChatGPT or these systems are really cool, you have to be really careful about what data you feed into it, because then it becomes available to everybody. So it's a very slippery slope right now.
Yeah. That human reinforced learning piece, I don't think people understand. That goes to a human being that looks at it and then feeds it back into the engine.
Well, and I think we all know, we've all heard the stats that ChatGPT is only 80% accurate, which means even with, let's go back to your doctor example, you can get multiple opinions, but it doesn't mean that you cannot do your own research to verify that stuff.
Right.
You know, there's still, right now, humans still are the backstop for generative AI. We have to verify what they're saying is correct. So I think it's still obviously early stages of it, but that's not scalable, right? You need you're going to need some other type of system to verify is this what they're saying correct.
Do you think that means that enterprises are just going to need their own LLMs? Just it's too like is Gartner going to need its own LLM? It's just too risky.
Well, I'd say every organization is going to have to make its own decisions about that. You know, in terms of what's your business strategy, what type of services and products do you want to provide to clients? Does it require, can you get away with just using the open source systems, the hosted systems, or do you need your own system? So that's what we talk to clients about today, is everybody's kind of going through their own decision process. What we will say is that in order for you to get the differentiated benefits of technologies like generative AI, you have to use your own data. And it has to be private and secured and accurate and ethically driven. That to me, to us, is part of how this is going to work.
I have a question. This is probably ignorant on my part, but like, how do all of these CEOs know what service to use and which to buy, and it seems like they're going to come in and sort of show a bunch of canned examples of customer service solutions, and I'm sort of over the party trick of it, and I'm kind of interested in it actually being a little bit more useful.
Of course.
Right? And I don't see that right now with some of the solutions, and that might be the fact that we're early in the solution, and we typically shove like old media into our new experience until we figure out what it can do, or we have to wait 10 years until we see it like really take fruition. And so I feel like we're sort of in that space, and I guarantee you that some of the executive teams that I've talked to are not even there yet. They're still emerging into this. So I'm curious as to how they learn about it and then choose to purchase a solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and this is part of what we do at Gartner. So Gartner, since January, has been actively at work. We have a resource center for our clients about explaining all aspects of generative AI. Literally, almost every researcher at Gartner, myself included, are looking at the implications of generative AI and AI on our particular areas of coverage. So I'd say, Mike, part of, the vendors are, they tell some great stories and they have some really great capabilities, but you need that objective partner, whether it's us or others, to take a look at that stuff and be able to cut through the hype. The hype right now is unbelievable, and we've never seen anything like it. But you need a trusted partner who's going to tell you what's right and what's not.
Totally. Is the hype, do you think it's like fear-based or opportunity-based? Like, where's
opportunity-based? Yeah. I mean, our research tells us is that CIOs are largely optimistic about the benefits of AI, and that the benefits outweigh the risks. So right now, people are very bullish on it. And I'd say, that's as it should be at this point in the hype cycle. We have not done a ton of experimentation. Give it time. There'll be at some point, the hype will subside and we'll go into the trough of disillusionment. But I'd say for the most part, people are pretty excited about this stuff. But Rob, Mike's right. A lot of people are in education mode. We spend a lot of time educating people.
Is there like a one prevailing sort of, dip your toe in the water approach, or is everybody just all over the place on how they want to kind of explore this?
Well, I think the logical place to start are those generative AI is being built into just about every application right now, every platform provider. So I'd say it's just a matter of experimentation. A number of our clients have set up private instances of generative AI with folks like Google and Microsoft. Those are also again safe environments to experiment. But I think with Microsoft and its Copilot and whatever Google's doing, those are probably going to be our first introductions on a broad scale to how this technology is going to work. So I think that's really the first step.
So it's a bit of like it's coming to them. In a way, like whether they come to it's coming to them through their tools that they use.
Everyday tools, absolutely. They're infused. It's going to be infused in almost every tool we use online. So we're going to get exposed to it. But our belief is that that's not going to provide true differentiation. It's when you get into using your own data, a collection of your own LLM models, because it's probably going to be more than one. It's not going to be one model. It's that type of the right people. We haven't even talked about talent. The right people that know how to work with this technology, and then a very clear vision of what you want this technology to do to the business. Those are things that are still being built right now, Rob. Most people are just saying, hey, I heard ChatGPT can write my PowerPoint presentation for me, and that's great. But that's only a fraction of what we think the possibilities are.
In the past, we've talked a lot about this concept that is... Prediction Machines, the book, talks a lot about like point solution change versus systemic change, and they kind of they've sort of positioned AI in this category, and they did this before ChatGPT, of comparing it to like the steam engine to the electric motor and saying like, yeah, we're at that like point solutions are adding this to augment and bolt on to their systems to make them better. But that's not the systemic change, which is like the assembly line, right? Which is what the like. And so, do you think how long do you think this phase of point solution, if you even buy into that, this point solution, just augmenting the tools we have to completely changing the tools we use?
I don't know that I have a specific point of view on that. I know Gartner does. What I can tell you is that most people are going to be in the point solution for quite some time. What you're describing, that next level, is more what we would call disruptive or transformational use of the technology. And based on past experience, only a fraction of organizations do that because it's going to be expensive. When you're talking about moving from, whatever Microsoft's going to charge incrementally for Copilot, which will probably be dollars per head, to investing lots of money in large language models and the talent and the generative AI applications sit on top of it. When those bills start adding up, that then people have to really ask themselves, do I really have the fortitude to do it? So I think people are going to find out quickly that to get to the differentiating side, the game-changing side of this technology, it's going to require a lot of investment. And that usually is the gate that holds people back because it's unknown, right? We don't know exactly what we're going to get for it. But this is where, again, competition, capitalism comes into play. There's going to be somebody out there that's going to do it, and they're going to start to experiment. They're going to set the standard for it. So I'd say, I don't know if that I have a time period, Rob, because this technology development, this acceleration curve is so different than what we've seen in the past. I can't even begin to venture when people will migrate to that next phase of development.
Do you think there's like a certain industry that might like be more inclined to lead the charge? Because it feels like they all line up that we need a few to jump and then the rest will all,
Yeah.
Do you think there's a certain industry, or do you think it's not industry based? It's the personalities of the folks, or what do you think?
Yeah, in reality, it's a combination of both. I'd say on the whole, if we look at the literally hundreds and hundreds of case examples that we've been collecting at Gartner on generative AI, what seems to emerge is marketing applications, which is about content creation. We have financial services, because their business is already largely digital and data-based. And then, we see the automotive industry has also been very active in this space with all the autonomous vehicle stuff. So we see those things happening. We're also seeing some movement in the healthcare space, believe it or not. Their use of analytics to be able to, for example, predict when people might die when they're in intensive care. It's stuff like that kind of grabs our attention. So I'd say on the whole, it's going to be the financial services and some manufacturing, progressive stuff, and then the whole marketing content generation space.
What do you think about government? Where do you think they're going to sit in all this? Are they going to? Well, I just think of companies or organizations that have like a lot of people to communicate with and not a lot of money to do it.
Yeah. So I would like to believe that our government, the public sector clients, are going to use the technology to achieve productivity gains that the commercial side of the house that they should be. And we're already seeing activity in that area. They also have a protection role. The government's about protecting its citizens, making sure that people have jobs, that the technology is not being used for bad things to that piece of it. So I'd say the government on a dual track. They want to try to use the technology to make their own operations more efficient, but also they have to think about protecting citizens and businesses.
Got it. Michael, you're deep into this. What's your...
Oh yeah, I'm deep with this space. So it's really
I
fun.
would have never guessed that after our years working together.
Yeah, right.
That's
what's really fun is the minute you start talking about those numbers, they just get huge, right? And so you can think about a huge organization that has an HR problem, right? Like anything, like a Deloitte or an IBM or somebody like that. And then you turn around and go, oh yeah, all of the armed forces for enlistment and reenlistment. There's very similar parallels one to one. So when I start talking to people inside the federal space about how it can be applied, it's almost like a magic wand that you start swinging around and evaporating their deep problems. Like every company, every team I've worked on is working on some ancient technology that like Alexander Graham Bell laid some like copper wire back in the day, and they built off of it, and they're still using it. And so we're finding the ability to like say, you don't have to like sunset systems, right? You don't have to like flip them over. We had, the big like rip them and flip them, right? You don't have to do any of that junk. You can just start accepting this other layer on top of it that becomes a transactional layer between what you're trying to extract, and then it becomes a little bit less unstructured data, and you start actually have some hooks to start manipulating it. And that, if I told somebody that, a year ago or 2 years ago, I just basically said $1 billion because we're going to need 600 people to do it. We're going to set it up at an agile stack to do all the, and this, at some point, writing the ticket for this solution becomes longer than just making the solution sort of happen. And that becomes really exciting to like get out of the like problem of fixing plumbing all the time, when instead they can really start solving like bigger problems. And so that I see places like that. I see it in like leveraging like old school brittle technology and making it accessible. I see places in like just massive amounts of data that have to be parsed for any reason, right? You're going to just get tons of it. I see it in compliance. I see a real great need in compliance, especially for like 508 compliance around accessibility concerns. In done correctly, a lot of the generative AI tools will turbocharge your accessibility stack, because you start getting multiple venues of media to be presented to you. Like, hey, we'll just have the thing read it to you. That kind of stuff, it starts happening. And so it alleviates a lot of the like structure, which could be considered red tape. It accelerates that, and that's my money that I'm paying in taxes to make some of those services happen. So I see it taking. I see a lot of people getting drools in their mouth over that sort of stuff, right? Their things are coming out. They're ready to start biting into it.
But Mike, you made a really good point, and we agree, is sometimes when you are caught up in hype, the first response is, we're just going to rip everything out and start over again. And that's not what we're saying. We agree with you that building on top of your existing systems may be the best answer for most people, because this technology is just different than things you've had in the past. We've all heard the example of ChatGPT, converting COBOL into Python. Maybe there's the elimination of test scripts. You don't have to write those anymore. Maybe software development goes from 10 weeks to 2 days. Maybe we're seeing the end of legacy IT, for example, and technical debt. I mean, these are all the things that still have yet to be explored, but I think it's just driving a whole nother level of conversation about the role of technology in both business and government, which is also exciting.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I see the same things, and I think this, I mean, maybe even take it further and say some of those things we think or thought we had to rip out, because of this, we don't. It's not as urgent anymore. Now, actually, when you put sort of graph concepts and LLMs together, you're like, you know what? Let the data stay where it is. We can now get to it. It's accessible. That the urgency to rip that and change it has gone down. We have a new interface to it now that actually is better than a graphical one. So we can get at the data, and maybe now you change the order of operation to like, well, just hold on to that thing. We've invested in it. It still works. And now we have an LLM to operate it. And so like, cause a lot of the times it's the human cost and the labor cost of operating the thing that causes them to want to forklift it out, is they're like, well, this is too hard to use and it takes too long. And you're like, oh, that's fine. If machines don't care, they have patience and they can replicate instantly. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of like, hey, maybe rethink whether you need to even rip those things out anymore now. What about creating a machine operator on top of it? And
I'm doing a forecasting dashboard for someone that should remain nameless for some financial services, and the queries, the data interrogation that they end up doing, right, against what they told the board or what they told the stakeholders or what they forecasted versus what they forecasted last year, is really interesting. And so the UI that we have to draw to support that is just nasty, right? You have to like show all of the cost centers and everybody underneath the cost center, and really what we should be asking is just like, what do you want to know? Like, what are you asking for? You're asking for like out of tolerance stuff, right? Like somebody spent more than what? Than 5%, than 9%, than 30%? And then how often do you want to know that? Like all the time when it happens, the next day when you show up? And so some of those like anticipatory kind of solutions that can be applied from, understanding what you're really asking for, and then, showing up with like a generative AI solution that's going to comb everything and, send you a text when something crazy happens, or write you a little digest for your morning brief as you show up. Like that, we're so close to that. And all of these sort of discrete things hint at the ability to do that. And so that, I keep falling back into that line of like, is it that Uber bot that knows everything? Is it is it the small swarm that is, only the 3 that are next to it know what's going on, and everything else is happening off of the other kind of space? And so that gets really interesting to me, because as a designer, as a UX kind of designer, I want to get into those harder problems and be like, let me solve what you're asking for before you ask it, and not have to present, every possible option to you on the screen at one time.
Yeah, I think the more I talk to people, they don't want to have the conversation about machine to machines talking to each other in natural language. I feel like their eyes cross. It's just overwhelming to wait. I'm just still getting over the people talking to machines in natural language. But I think the implications are massive, and I think your book kind of really is like the beginning of that journey to go, wait a second, like that's a thing. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about one machine buying from another machine. It wouldn't make sense for the machine to buy from a human. That's like, why? What a waste. Yeah. So we're really looking at like, this is machines, and why wouldn't they do it in natural language? Because that would allow us to monitor and have agency over it. Like, why do we want them to do it in JSON or something we can't understand? Why not just see a conversation between those? Before we close today, I just want to get your thoughts on, do you think they should talk our language, or do you think they should talk their own language?
Well, actually, Gartner did some research. We call it Maverick research, and we believe that machines will talk to each other in English. That was our position.
Mine
too.
So
because it is a global language and a lot of the programming is English based. So that's, and I would be inclined to agree with that as Anglo-centric as it is. I think that's where things are going.
Yeah. And even if it's language, it's still our human language, not machine, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who disagree with us, by the way. But I think it's inevitable just because of the agency and trust. I want to see what they said. I want to be in the loop. Even if they bought, I want to make sure that it did the things that I wanted it to do, and I want to be in the loop. Even if it doesn't wait for a final decision from me and it went ahead and bought, I want to be able to look at the transcript that took place.
Yes. Without question. We're very clear about that, Mike, that we are always going to be involved. Even in this era of machines as autonomous customers, let's say that my bot wants to put a product into my basket that I didn't ask for, but maybe I need it. If that happens once and I like it, great. If not, I'll just say, don't do that anymore. That's the thing that we forget, is that we should be able to program this type of intervention into these machines so that we don't feel like we're out of control. We feel like we're in control. Because I think part of the trust is you feel like you have some degree of control. Once that stops happening, then you start to lose trust. Yeah. So it's a very, very delicate balance, I think, that has to be achieved.
So you think we're at the beginning of the end of APIs as we know them?
Oh, I don't know enough about APIs to answer that question. I tend to think more about, how these machine customers can make our lives easier, help us make better decisions, maybe lead to less waste. We didn't talk about that at all, which is maybe I buy too much produce every week. My refrigerator steps in and says, you know what? You buy 5 apples a week, but you only eat 2. And the garbage can tells me you throw 3 away. So why don't we just buy 2 next week?
Yeah.
It's stuff like that, both at home and in business, that I think is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, we conserve our decision making. It's energy, it takes calories. Like there are decisions we could give more thought to, but we do kind of make sure that we, make conscious choices on what we think hard about and what we think less about. And so even though we're capable of maybe making better decisions on certain things than machines, we don't give it the mental energy so that machines will give it, and therefore they'll be better decision makers just on the basis that we don't care enough.
Yeah, but on things that we do care about. So let's say, because we don't say machine customers are good for everything. My wife loves purses. She would never delegate the purchase of a purse to a machine, ever, right? Because it's an emotional purchase. Now, could it do research on her behalf and say, these 5 stores have the style that you like, they all have inventory available, here's a map to be able to hit all the 5 stores in one afternoon. Yeah, totally get that. But the actual decision has to be hers because there's emotion associated with it. So we're very clear that non-emotional, routine, commodity-based decisions can be delegated. The others, there may be a sliding scale.
Right. And help her. Like it might just pipe in and say, hey, there's dangerous materials in this.
Yeah. Or this
breaks
this manufacturer has been cited recently for bad workplace conditions.
Right.
Or not enough diversity, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
It's that type of help, going back to our earlier conversation, that research that I think actually can help us make better decisions.
Yeah. So I think the next breakthrough in my mind is one we're already on and evolutionary, but it is the nailing down this reputation thing so that machines have a reliable source. And I'm really bullish, looking at how a lot of these, there's a lot of criticisms about reputation on Amazon and some of these, but they do, and I know this through my wife who actually spends a lot of time on the other side of like the, hiring the people that actually try, and they really do try to make sure that these are accurate. It's a lot less gamed, I think, than people might think, and they really are trying to get to truth on these reputations. They spend a lot of money to check for bad reviews and false reviews and that sort of thing. And I think the more that evolves, I think it kind of unlocks more trust. To your guys' point, we can hand over more trust to the machines when we can trust where the source of where they're getting their data from.
Yeah, well said. We totally agree.
Oh, I want to throw something in that's totally off wall then. Okay, so I purchase things in a very similar way, right? There's a lot of the review checking, right? Highs and lows and seeing what and doing my deep research. But I am not a millennial or Gen Z. And I watch them and have researched the way they purchase, and it's not the way we purchase, right? And it does have more to do with maybe not even a trust broker, an influence broker, right? And so now you're going to TikTok to find where you should go to a restaurant by the influencer. So at some point, it's probably a price point where I would be willing to let a influence bot purchase things on my behalf, and maybe my wife wouldn't do it, right? But it could be that thing has more knowledge of the cultural zeitgeist that's sort of happening to be able to like stay abreast of the wave. And so that gets really, really interesting to me because the reviews don't matter. The ratings aren't a part of it. It becomes exposure. It becomes count. It becomes who you're connected to via that situation. And then And then we could still break it down to, purchase influencer and purchase authority, right? Which it still sort of falls in the camps of. But your purchase influencer becomes very fluid.
Yeah.
It can be just it could be a fad, right? Like a trending fad that you want to move in on.
Well, that's what LLMs are. I mean, they aggregate. You can go to ChatGPT and say what restaurants you recommend and blah blah blah, and it does all the disclaimers, but it does go ahead and make a recommendation, and that in essence is a sort of gather. It's outdated. It's 2021, but yeah, I sort of wonder if I've kind of spent a lot of time thinking about LLMs as a source of reputation score, and what does it need to look like if it was actually focused on that purposefully and trained for that, and updated on a regular enough basis that you can trust it. And that's where my fear comes into, like, if we start using one source, then we get into the blunt instrument problem of everyone buying carrots on the same day.
Or what if there is an influencer bot who is invading the LLMs with false information?
Oh man.
Right. So, that's a very real possibility. So that even if you did have your own custo bot that worked for you, is diving into various LLMs that were populated with false information,
already gained,
right? So, I mean, I think our security folks will tell you that any system that's used for good can also be used for bad,
right?
And that's something we all have to be mindful of. So I really like kind of this angle that you all have around trust and reputation, because we're just not thinking that far enough ahead, but we have to.
Yeah, and I like your point that it's probably going to come out of some aggregation, not one source, because that's too dangerous. It's too corruptible, too centralized. There has to be some form of decentralization. Doesn't have to be as far as blockchain or anything, but it can. But it's got to be some sort of aggregation of trusted sources, not just one LLM that we go to and say, hey, where's the best place to get tires? Or what's the best tire to buy? So, well, this is a great conversation. I loved where it went. I love these sort of. I think reputation is a huge part of the picture of leveraging the opinions and the algorithms of these systems. And so, yeah, this is great.
I think that's interesting because I do too as well. And I'm relying on this trust sort of space because of my inherent distrust of any system that's provided for me. Right. So like, I know all of my vendors are going to start giving me these options. And so I don't really trust them to be looking out for my best interests. I trust them to look out for their best interests. And so the transparency of how it's happening, if it's happening for me, or if I'm in control of it, what were my tolerances against it, are pretty not only interesting, but like required, right? As a requirement for me to sort of play in this space and give some of that stuff. So I think it's cool that we dug into it. I think it's really cool that you guys split this like 3-tiered system of like, these are the low level things that you think can happen. You sort of explained it in the agency that your bot would have. And so that sort of starts becoming fun. And then I just really immediately start getting into the fact that it's like, wow, your business really has to understand who your customer is. Like at a root level, like beyond the UX stuff, like what's the journey, what's the true journey, so that you can look at it and really start identifying those opportunities to leverage this stuff.
Oh, yes.
Right? To like really start reducing friction points. Yeah. And that's always, that gets into all this stuff too, because customer service, right? The whole, what's the joke is the way you say customer service to the bot is the real you.
Yeah. How you treat bots, how you treat machines says a lot about who you are. We were hearing stories about, companies that are using bots for the recruiting process, how you treat those machines. And if you treat them badly, that says something about you. So it's definitely something interesting to think about.
I'm going to have to go home and make sure that I have a talk with my kids then. I'm now a little worried about
please and thank yous.
I'm a little worried about them.
Yeah, maybe it's I mean, a lot of people do say please and thank you when they talk to Alexa or Siri, you know. I don't think it's a bad thing.
It's good practice.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. Let's wrap it up. And
thank you so much.
I really appreciate having you on. It was great. You guys are a trusted source. I think, in my opinion, that Gartner's highly rated but underrated still. I think you guys do great work, and I love reading what you guys have to say, and it inspires me a lot.
Well, thank you very much.
Some of my thinking. So thanks a lot for coming on.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks again for hanging out with us right here on Invisible Machines. Please subscribe to UX Magazine wherever you get your podcasts so that you can hear new episodes as soon as they come out. If you want to watch new episodes, and I recommend you do, the video feeds are really pretty amazing. Follow the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. And I think that's all I have for you this week. So let's go ahead and look forward to next week when we will connect again right here on Invisible Machines.